Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and today I'm going to be doing my June wrap-up and my July TBR. June was kind of not a great month in some ways. It started out with, sad news about Pax Panic, lost Jack, and then something else that I haven't really talked about yet. We actually lost Meepers as well. I haven't posted about it or said anything about it, and I kind of don't want to at this point because I'm tired of feeling sad, so that's all I'm going to say about it here. Maybe I'll get to it or talk about it more in depth later on when I'm ready. But for now, I just want to jump in and talk about all the books I read in June, which I finished 8 out of the 9 books that I wanted to read in June, which I think is really, really great for me. When it comes to ranking them in any sort of order, it was a really difficult ranking this month, and I know I say that every month, but there was one very clear winner for like bottom of the pile, and then a lot of the stuff in the middle, like I read 3 different books, like at least 3, that all ended on cliffhangers, and I'm not a big fan of cliffhangers, so it was really hard for me to like figure out where to put them in the ranking. But I did the best I can. So let's jump in with number 8, my least favorite book of the month, The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. This is an Owl Crate book box book, so it's a YA fantasy. And I went into this one with pretty high hopes because there's a quote right on the front from Leigh Bardugo that says, "Draws you in and leaves you begging for more." I'm a big fan of Leigh Bardugo's adult stories and some of her YA, Six of Crows. So I had high hopes for this one. And for the first time ever, I actually tabbed a book, only a little bit. And the reason that I tabbed this book is because I don't know if this happened earlier in the story. I'm not sure. But at random points in the back half of this book, like the story switches from like a first person narrative to like a third person narrative, where like all of a sudden it'll be like later, when all of this is done and the forest has finished what it set out to do, Winnie will think she should have gone back to the party for help. Like, who is telling us this? Like, there's just these random spots in the book where like there's these random lines, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then this one was my favorite one. The main character is trying to pick out an outfit, and she says, Winnie shoves at her glasses. She still lacks a birthday gift for the twins, and a fancy outfit definitely doesn't exist in her wardrobe, though she would never wear her Save the Whales hoodie. Ha ha. That's literally what it says. Ha ha. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, what the hell is this line? What even is this? So this is a book that ends on a cliffhanger. It doesn't answer any questions. It sets up a lot, but answers none of the questions, which is super annoying and super frustrating. Like, sometimes they'll answer some. This one just doesn't answer any of them. It's like a hard drop. This is not a full story. This is part 1 of a larger tale. I do not like that. Do not like that at all. So that is why The Luminaries is at the bottom of the list. Okay, so other than that one, all the rest of the books I did like in some capacity, just in different degrees. So in number 7, even though it is number 7, I did still like it, and that is One Last Stop by Casey McQuinston. She is most known for her first book, Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is an LGBT romance, and I thought I would read this one, also an LGBT romance, for Pride. I did not like this one as much as Red, White, and Royal Blue. I didn't like this one as much because I kind of feel like the romance was the B storyline and not the A storyline, which is kind of weird for a romance book. But the main character in this book, August, she's in a very, she's in this place where she doesn't have any friends. She's kind of alone. She's on her own, but she's also someone that doesn't want to stay in one place, doesn't want to put down roots anywhere. And there's a whole backstory as to kind of why she is the way that she is. And this book is really about her journey of self-discovery. And yes, one part of that, a big part of that, is the romance, but that's not the only part. And again, this book is quite long for romance because there's a lot going on in it. So because there's so much going on in it, the romance is not the A storyline, what it probably should have been. That's why this is a little bit lower on my list. However, I still had a good time reading it. It's a fun book. There's nothing glaringly wrong with it. Those are just a couple of the things that I noticed. Number 6 is going to be Lakeside Cemetery by Jessica Haas. And I understand that this is Jessica's first book. So I think for a first book, this is great. This is great. Really fun story about a girl who happens to raise a couple people from the dead, and there's kind of a murder mystery. There's all this stuff going on, but it's a really fun story, cute, quirky. There's a couple of things that I think could be improved upon. There's some other little things, some things I tabbed. Again, just one in particular. When I do a full review, I'll talk about it more. But again, overall, really enjoyable story. I had a fun time reading it, and I would definitely check out whatever Jessica decides to write next. 4 and 5 were really difficult because this is the middle of the pile, and I like these books both equally, but in different ways. So number 5, I'm going with Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Another Owl Crate book box that I was super excited to jump into because I have read a Rebecca Ross book before and I really enjoyed it. And for the most part, I really enjoyed this book. We have a young girl. Her brother has gone off to this war where he's fighting on the side of this god against this other god. She's writing him letters and putting them in her wardrobe, and it's magic, and her letters are being sent magically through the magic air to this young boy named Roman Kit, and Roman just happens to be her rival at the newspaper that they both work at. They're both trying to get this columnist position. Iris can't stand Kit. But even though she kind of secretly likes him, Kit really likes her. He writes back to her, but under a different name, so she doesn't know it's him. There's a lot going on in this story. It's very much a romance, but it says that. It sets that up front. So it wasn't so eye-rolling going into it. What was eye-rolling, though, is what happened at the end. Because, again, I thought this book was going along so great. I thought the story was so interesting, especially when it gets to the war part. And then all of a sudden, the story takes a very sharp turn and again, just totally ends on a cliffhanger. And that really annoyed me. It did not annoy me as much as the Luminaries because there are actually questions that are answered in here. So at least there's that. But again, it's clearly setting up for a much larger tale, and I feel like some of that at least could have been explored here, so it felt like more of a complete story. But again, it's very much just part 1 of a larger tale. This one just came out, so I don't know how long it's going to be till the sequel came out. I probably would have preferred having at least books 1 and 2 before I started this one. So I wish that they would put volume 1 on these books. That is what I wish, so that I would know going in not to read it until I have a couple that I can read through at the same time. So that brings me to my 4th favorite book of June, Half Human Heroes. Half Human Heroes is an anthology collection of short fantasy stories, and these are all stories from members of the BookTube community, or I should say AuthorTube as well. I had such a good time reading this. It was such a delight. I definitely have a few favorites in here. I've already said this before in other places, but Dishonored in Death by Mason in the Dark, Home of the Gnome, Jeremy Fee, and More or Less Human by Margaret Dennard. 3 of my favorites. There's definitely more in here. There's so many good stuff in here, and honestly, it just made me happy to like read an anthology about fantasy, because I've read a couple horror ones, and this is the first fantasy one, and I really hope to see more of this. And yeah, again, can't wait to talk more about it and talk about all these stories in here in depth. It was a really fun time. I didn't personally connect with every single one, which is why it's lower on my list, but that's okay, because the ones I did connect with, I connected with so hard. All right, top 3. So my third favorite book of June is going to be Fractal Noise by Christopher Paolini. Again, really excited about this one because Christopher Paolini's last book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, I absolutely loved. Having now finished Fractal Noise, you definitely do not have to read To Sleep in a Sea of Stars before this one. You do not. Like, you can tell how they're kind of related, but the stories have nothing to do with each other. So this is a real simple sci-fi story. You have a group that works for a company. They're out in space. They discover that there's this like mysterious hole on the planet. So they put together a team to go investigate this hole. And of course, the team is made up of various members who don't get along, who all have these strong personalities. How are they going to come together as a team to make this scientific discovery? Can they? Blah, blah, blah. I don't want to tell you what happens because I kind of love what happens. I really love how like what you expect is not what happens at all. This book, you should expect the unexpected going in. You should expect the unexpected. For the most part, again, I loved this one. I loved the characters, especially the main character. He's dealing with a trauma, so seeing him go through that while he's on this mysterious planet out in space, like, there's a lot of good stuff in here, a lot of good stuff. The ending of this book is not a cliffhanger, but it wasn't the ending that I personally wanted. I respect the ending for what it is. I respect the way that he chose to end it. It's just not personally what I wanted, so that's why this is not number 1 or 2. But overall, I still really enjoyed this one. My second favorite book of June, another LGBTQ romance, and that is The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. If you are familiar at all with Cassandra Clare and her Shadowhunter world, this is a little side adventure, side novella about 2 of my absolute favorite characters, Alec Lightwood and Magnus Bane. Alec Lightwood and Magnus Bane, Malik for short, that's their couple name, is probably one of my favorite couples in like all of books. Yes, they are one of my number 1 favorite bookish couples of all time. And I absolutely loved this book. It is a short story. It's a short story. It's about when they first kind of get together as a couple. Alec and Magnus. Alec is a shadow hunter, so he fights demons. Magnus is a warlock, so he's super cool too, in case you don't know anything about them. If you don't know anything about them, like, go look it up. Go check it out right now. They are amazing. But seeing like the beginnings of their relationship, they try to take this vacation. Their vacation goes off the rails. And you really see how they kind of like really fall in love with each other. And it's just so sweet. It is just so sweet. I absolutely love this one. Had a great time with it. Why is it not number 1? I guess because it's a simple story compared to my number 1 pick, but overall, still love this one. Again, Alec, Magnus, the perfect couple. So that brings me to my number 1 pick for June, which is going to be Wizard in Glass by Stephen King. Predictable? Probably. This is definitely not the first Stephen King book I've put at number 1. But this is, however, the first book in the Dark Tower series that I've put at number 1. The Dark Tower series, I've kind of like gone back and forth on it. Some of the books I've liked more than the others, but this book, Wizard in Glass, which is the 4th book, I absolutely love this one. I love this one. This is basically like kind of a story within a story. Up until this point in the Dark Tower series, we have our main character, Roland, and his group of friends, Eddie, Susanna, Jake. And Roland has really been this mysterious character. He's this mysterious gunslinger. Like, he shoots people. He's like the John Wick of this world. And you don't really know much about his past. Like, you've heard tidbits throughout the other books, but nothing to really like explain how he got on this path, how he started his quest for the Dark Tower. Like, where did all this come from? This book finally explains it. This book is a story within a story, and 90% of this book is Roland and his friends sitting around a campfire and Roland telling them his history, how he ended up on this path, what happened to him. And what happened to him, oh man, it's like, at the same time, it's a classic story, it's a tragic story, there is romance, there is action, there's adventure, like, wow, there is a lot in here, and it's amazing. Like, this is Stephen King storytelling at its best, to me, anyway. Again, there's nothing horror in here, really, except the horror of what people sometimes do to each other. The horror of how people can react to strangers or things they don't understand. Like, there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I can't wait to talk more about it. So, Wizard in Glass was my favorite book of June. So that leaves the one book I did not finish because I haven't mentioned it, and that is Immortalized in Ink by N.P Hunt. And the reason I haven't finished this is really because I've only been reading like a poem a day. So if I go at that rate, I should be finished with this about mid-July. As you can tell, Arlo started tabbing this one. I'm tabbing things that I think are like my favorites, ones that I just find really interesting, and a couple that I found kind of sad, things that made me emotional. So as you can see, I've definitely got a bunch in here so far, and I expect to have more before I get to the end. So now let's jump into the rest of my TBR for July, starting with my reader recommendation of the month, Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I have seen this book absolutely everywhere this year, and I know I am late to the hype train, but I am so thankful that one of my followers over on Instagram recommended it to me so I could finally give this one a try. As a huge animal lover, I'm hoping this one isn't too much of a tearjerker, but we'll see what happens. Next up is my Stephen King book for the month, and this one is going to be Bag of Bones. I have never read this one before, and I don't really know much about it. I did read the flap, so it's about an author, of course, King does this a lot, who lost a wife. He's out at a cabin, and the town is like being held prisoner by this powerful millionaire. I don't know. Sounds like it could be good stuff. Hopefully it's one of the good King books and not one of the ones that is way too long. Next up, I have my adult fantasy for the month, and I'm happy to say that I am finally reading my first Christina Henry book, Alice. I've seen a bunch of people read this one, but the person who I saw most recently, the one who finally convinced me to read this, is Bad is Rad. Bad is Rad read this one recently. She thought that I would like it, so I decided now would be a good time to give it a try. So, Bad, I'll let you know what I think about this one. Next up, I have my rando book of the month, when I randomly pick a book off my shelf. And for this, I decided to go with an indie science fiction book, and that is Rogue by Alex Schuler. This was sent to me by the author. I wasn't able to get to it last month, so I figured this month would be a good try. I've been reading a lot of sci-fi recently, which is a change, but I think a nice change. Next up, I have my YA fantasy of the month, and I am going back to the Throne of Glass series with Queen of Shadows. I am already intimidated by how chunky this book is, and there's like 90 chapters, but hopefully I can get through this one before the end of the month. Next up, I have my middle grade fantasy, and I said I was going to continue the series, and therefore I am, and that is Syren. This is the 5th book in the Septimus Heap series. Again, I will say it again, these books are chunky. If I am not liking this one, maybe I'll do my first DNF in a few years. But I'm hopeful that it'll turn out well because I did enjoy the last one, so I'm going to give this book a shot. And then finally, I have my Owl Crate book of the month, and that's going to be Together We Burn by Isabel Ibanez. Again, this was just kind of a random pick this month. I just kind of looked at the pile, and I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of my books are either red, white, or blue for 4th of July, Independence Day, and this one kind of fits the bill. Like, it's more orangey than red, but I figure it kind of fits. So Together We Burn. Hopefully this one turns out to be a winner. So there you have it. Those are all the books I read in June and what I'm planning to read in July. So now Lola and I want to know from you, what did you read in June? What was your favorite book? What was your least favorite? What are you planning to read in July? Let us know all your thoughts in the comments section below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff and more furry friends coming your way soon. All right, everyone, happy reading.